With so much focus being placed on Pokrovsk, it's easy to forget that this once important logistical city isn't the only settlement that Russia is trying to take in Donetsk. Myrnohrad is being hit just as hard, and Ukraine has to face the likely fact that the city will soon fall. The withdrawal has started, and Ukraine has made Russia pay for getting ahead of itself as its forces withdraw. The Russians thought they were winning in Myrnohrad. What they didn't know was that they were walking into a trap of Ukraine's design, leading to machine guns, drones, and F-16s blowing them to pieces. It all started when Ukraine realized that some of the forces that it had kept inside Myrnohrad were becoming increasingly exposed to the slow and grinding Russian advance. A choice had to be made. Those soldiers could stay where they were, picking off Russian troops as they advanced, while other Russian troops attempted to encircle their position. Alternatively, Ukraine could withdraw its soldiers, ceding a small portion of Myrnohrad territory and allowing Russia to believe it had scored a significant victory. And what a victory it would be for Vladimir Putin and his embattled forces. The push for Myrnohrad, which is part of Putin's attempts to take Pokrovsk, has been brutal for Russia's forces. On November 25th alone, Russia lost 980 soldiers, the Kyiv Independent reports. Many of those soldiers would have been part of the assault on Myrnohrad, and some of the 980 likely lost their lives after falling into an ingenious Ukrainian trap. But we'll get into that in a moment. As Russia's forces slowly encroach on the soon-to-be-encircled Ukrainians, the choice was made. Withdrawal was the best option, both to preserve the lives of the soldiers and to ensure that the defenses behind the territory Russia would soon take could be reinforced with a regrouped unit of strong troops. After pushing for Myrnohrad since late October, with November seeing the Russian army pummel much of the city with airstrikes, the signs of Ukrainian withdrawal must have come as a massive relief. Finally, after so much bloodshed, they will be able to enter the city and claim territory for Putin. Commanders would be happy. Champagne corks may have even been popped inside the Kremlin as the isolated top officials inside Moscow celebrated the capture of a city that only cost them several thousand lives. Ukraine had other ideas. It was going to withdraw its soldiers from the southern area of Myrnohrad that was most at risk, but it was going to do it in a way that would cause as much damage to the Russian infiltrators and occupiers as possible. This would not be Ukraine running away from a fight. Instead, Ukraine devised a plan that involved the creation of a devious and devastating trap that the Russian forces would never see coming. The plan was simple. As the main Ukrainian grouping in southern Myrnohrad disengaged and withdrew to safer positions in the northern region of the settlement, Ukrainian 35th Marine Brigade would hold the flanks and keep the Russian forces from closing in on the withdrawing troops. That brigade had to keep a corridor open for their comrades. It did just that, to devastating effect. Ukraine couldn't have chosen a better brigade for the job, both because this particular brigade has showcased outstanding bravery and has endured heartbreaking loss as a result of Putin's invasion. The 35th Marine Brigade enjoyed an early standout moment during Ukraine's 2022 counteroffensive following Russia's initial invasion. Several of the brigade's units managed to cross the Inulets River in Kherson Oblast, forming a bridgehead that served as a springboard for the recapture of a village named Davydiv Brid. That village was only recaptured for 2 days, but the 35th Marine Brigade had delivered a swift jab that bloodied the collective mouth of the Russian armed forces, showing Putin that he would by no means have things all his own way in Kherson. The same brigade took a very active role in Ukraine's massive, though ultimately unsuccessful, 2023 counteroffensive. Working alongside several other brigades, the 35th Marines formed part of a spearhead designed to penetrate the Velika Novosilka front. They were partially successful. The 2,000 soldiers the brigade sent managed to smash a gap through the Russian front, leading to the liberation of Makarivka, Storozheva, and Urozhaina. All of this success against the Russian forces had been tinged by tragedy, a very recent tragedy, in fact. On November 1, 2025, an awards ceremony was organized by the 35th Marine Brigade to commemorate the founding of one of its battalions. Russia must have found out about this ceremony as it launched 2 Iskander missiles and 3 Geran drones at the gathered soldiers in the Dnipropetrovsk region that unfortunately scored a direct hit. Once the dust had settled, Ukraine's brave Marine Brigade had lost 12 of its members and 7 civilians, with another 36 being injured. Ukraine acted quickly, launching an investigation that led to the commander of the battalion in question being charged with negligence. As for the rest of the brigade, it would have had a massive thirst for revenge against the Russian occupiers. The withdrawal from Myrnohrad served up the perfect opportunity to slake that thirst. As the 35th Marine Brigade set up its trap, the rest of Ukraine's forces began withdrawing from southern Myrnohrad. The news of that withdrawal must have reached Russian occupiers, who were already slowly approaching the Ukrainian position from the eastern side of the city, and they clearly felt that the perfect opportunity had fallen into their laps. Those soldiers, who were located in the Novoekonomicha settlement, began to push forward, feeling certain they were about to simply walk into a former Ukrainian defensive position and claim the territory and the glory for themselves. How wrong they were. Whether these forces thought Ukraine was withdrawing or Russia controlled more territory than it actually did doesn't matter. Almost casually, Euromaidan press reports, the Novoekonomicha troops started walking into the region of southern Myrnohrad that was quickly being evacuated by most Ukrainian soldiers. We say most because troops from the 35th Marine Brigade stayed behind. Having set up an ambush to the east, all that brigade had to do was watch and wait for the Russian forces to continue their almost strolling advance until they had reached just the right point. And that's when the machine guns started firing. Those guns shredded through the first Russians that neared Ukraine's southern Myrnohrad position, all under the watchful lenses of Ukraine's reconnaissance drones, Euromaidan press reports. You would think that this ambush would have alerted the Russian soldiers following up that they were walking into a trap, but it didn't. After the first Russians were shredded, more arrived only to be cut down by machine gun fire. As Euromaidan press puts it, even when the first Russian was killed, the next one still had no idea, underlining the lack of Russian drone observation over the main direct routes into Myrnohrad. That's almost criminal in a war where drones have become the weapon of choice for both sides. As United 24 media points out, Russia long ago copied Ukraine's tactic of deploying massive amounts of first-person view or FPV drones to the front lines. These drones fly low to the ground and launch kamikaze assaults against Ukraine's forces. However, it doesn't seem as though Russia has gotten the memo about using the other drones to maintain a bird's-eye view of the battlefield. This is something that Ukraine does constantly, and it paid off in southern Myrnohrad, as those drones alerted the 35th Marine Brigade to the Russian advance. But for Russia, this lack of observation drones means that its soldiers have to walk into assaults blind. How are they ever supposed to know that a trap is about to be sprung when the tools they could use to detect those traps aren't being provided to them? Russia's tactical failures ended up being the 35th Marine Brigade's gain, and the Russian advance on the eastern side of Ukraine's position was quickly shut down in repeated hails of machine gun fire. However, we've already mentioned that Russia was attempting to encircle the Ukrainian soldiers withdrawing from southern Myrnohrad, so it shouldn't be a surprise that Russia had troops descending on Ukraine's troops from the west. The 35th Marine Brigade has accounted for those Russian occupiers too. Ukraine's reconnaissance drones revealed that the Russians advancing from the west had focused the majority of their efforts on the railway line below the Rivne region. That was a smart move. A thick tree line in that region provided the cover that Russia's infantry infiltration teams needed to move around without Ukraine knowing precisely what they were up to. Artillery could have been deployed, though it may have been wasted without knowing the exact positions of the Russian soldiers. And the 35th Marine Brigade had no intention of battling in the tree line, both because it didn't want to give up the eastern flank and because that sort of battle would have been long, drawn out, and likely to have left some of Ukraine's withdrawing soldiers exposed. Russia thought it had everything figured out, but the 35th Marine Brigade was 2 steps ahead the whole time. As machine guns shredded Russian infiltrators to the east, FPV drones operated by drone pilots stationed with the 35th Marine Brigade went on seek and destroy missions in the Rivne tree line. Those FPV drones weaved their way through the trees, conducting direct strikes on any Russian soldiers that they found. As the FPV drones did their work, octocopters were deployed to the same tree line. Their task was simple: drop explosive charges on any groups that were attempting to close in on the withdrawing Ukrainians. These octocopters flew back and forth, delivering explosive fury to the Russian occupiers. Even nighttime didn't bring temporary safety. The 35th Marine Brigade deployed thermal vision drones into the Rivne tree line when the skies grew dark, continuing the seek and destroy mission by searching for camouflaged Russian soldiers that may have been attempting to rest for the night. The 35th Marine Brigade created a kill zone for the Russian soldiers advancing from the west. And frankly, those soldiers should have seen this part of the trap coming. The use of drones to create veritable no-man's lands across the front line has been a common tactic for Ukraine, though it's often more overt than what we've seen in Myrnohrad. Ukraine has been creating these drone-infested kill zones long enough that The Independent reported on them back in August. The outlet claimed that medics can't keep up with the sheer scale of death being caused by drones in these kill zones. Both Ukraine and Russia have used their FPV drones for these purposes. In some areas of the front lines, drones patrol territory up to 20 kilometers or 12 miles from the main combat zones. Gunshot wounds are becoming rarer, The Independent claims, as it is drones that are doing almost all of the damage in Ukraine. Politico has also reported on Ukraine's use of these kill zones. claiming on November 18th that Ukraine's heavy use of drones has put an end to the trench-based warfare that defined much of the early years of the Ukraine invasion. The deputy head of the President's Office of Ukraine, Pavlo Paliza, told Politico exactly what these kill zones mean for soldiers on the ground. "We have now switched to a drone versus drone war," he told the outlet. "Drones are now able to sit in ambush, intercept enemy logistics and disrupt supplies. They've also made it more difficult to maintain positions. If you are detected, every weapon in the area will immediately rush to destroy you." Now think about what that meant for Russia's troops west of southern Myrnohrad. No forward step could be a safe one, as there might be an FPV drone lurking behind every tree. As soon as one of those drones discovers a soldier, the footage it fed back to its operator would be shared with every other drone pilot flying their unmanned aerial vehicles in the Rivne tree line. Even if the Russian soldier survived the initial drone that found him, others would come to take him out. And once that soldier was down, the drones went back on the hunt. Russia's Western forces were destroyed before they could intercept the withdrawing Ukrainians. However, Russia may have still managed to close the circle were it not for the air support that the 35th Marine Brigade received. As the brigade kept the corridor open by springing traps on Russia's encroaching ground forces, F-16s and Su-27s took to the skies to hammer Russia's forces from above. These jets didn't focus their attention on the infiltrators or the soldiers attempting to cut Ukraine off at the pass. Their targets were slightly deeper, and their goal was to prevent Russia from reinforcing their quickly depleting forces with more soldiers that may have been able to stop Ukraine's retreat. The F-16s took to the sky first. Their target was the Kapitolna mine, which serves as a key Russian stronghold in Donetsk, as well as a hub that the country's drone operators use to send their own FPV drones into the fray. We mentioned earlier that Russia didn't deploy any drones to help its soldiers advance from the east, which is why so many were cut down by Ukraine's machine gun fire. Perhaps the reason no Russian drones were present was that Ukraine's F-16s dropped several GBU-39 bombs onto the Kapitolna mine, which Euromaidan Press says caused the loss of equipment and drone assets, along with taking out Russian infantry. There will be no backup for Russia. Its troops and drones lay in tatters. The GBU-39, which is also known as the Small Diameter Bomb Weapon System, was an excellent choice for the task of taking out Russian forces protected by a mine. The US Air Force says that the GBU-39 contains a smart carriage that can hold a 250-pound warhead, and the bomb can be launched from the internal bays or external hardpoints of fighter jets like the F-16. These are also precision-guided bombs that use GPS to navigate to their targets. With their relatively small size and range of 40 nautical miles, GBU-39s can be launched from well outside visual range, meaning the assorted troops and drone operators at Kapitolna Mine didn't stand a chance. They were dead before they even knew what hit them. Ukraine's clever use of its F-16s in this ambush also demonstrates how important these US-made fighter jets have been to the country since the first of them arrived back in August 2024. In the year or so since, Ukraine has used its F-16s primarily in a defensive capacity, as the jets are perfect for engaging long-range drones and missiles as they make their way toward Ukraine's cities. However, as Ukraine's stockpile of fighter jets has grown, it's increasingly used its F-16s to conduct offensive operations, like the one at the Kapitolna mine. According to a November 20th report by Aerospace Global News, Ukraine's F-16s have now intercepted more than 1,300 aerial targets, in addition to scoring 300 direct hits on ground targets. You can add one more ground target to the list after the Myrnohrad withdrawal. For all the attention given to Ukraine's growing stock of Western jets, it's easy to forget that the country also has a small force of Soviet-era fighters. Those jets are deployed with increasing frequency now that Ukraine has so many F-16s. Also aiding the withdrawal from Myrnohrad were Su-27s that followed up the good work done by Ukraine's F-16s with a secondary strike on the western flank. This time, a pair of Ukraine's jets located an isolated building that Russia had been attempting to use as a means to isolate one of the Ukrainian groupings. 2 JDAM-guided bombs later, and that building had been reduced to rubble, destroying an entire Russian assault group that was stationed inside. These aerial assaults finally closed the trap on the Russian forces. Thanks to the time bought by these jets and the work of the 35th Marine Brigade, Ukraine's soldiers were able to safely withdraw to a defensive line further north in Myrnohrad. The Russian encirclement failed, and Putin's forces have another strong layer of defenses to break through if they're going to take this Donetsk settlement. Not that you would know that if you listened to Russia. Contradictions followed, as Euromaidan Press reports. The Russian command reacted in its usual contradictory fashion, claiming initially that the Ukrainians had failed to withdraw and that they had successfully cut everyone off, the outlet claims. However, hours later, another edict from Russian command claimed that the Russian forces had taken southern Myrnohrad. So where's the contradiction? This second claim, coming just a couple of hours after the first, reveals that Ukraine's withdrawal went off without a hitch. If it hadn't, the fighting in southern Myrnohrad would have been long and brutal. Russia can't claim to have stopped the withdrawal in one breath, only to claim the rapid fall of southern Myrnohrad in the next. It had to be one or the other. And it was the latter, just as Ukraine planned. Russia paid a much higher price in the blood of its soldiers than it expected for that capture. As for Ukraine, it does have to absorb the loss of the southern part of an embattled settlement. However, that loss was part of an organized and intelligent withdrawal that caused practically no casualties to Ukraine, while leaving dozens of dead or injured Russian occupiers in its wake. As for the soldiers who withdrew, they have now become part of the consolidated defenses in the north of Myrnohrad and Pokrovsk, Euromaidan press reports. Encirclement is no longer possible. These consolidated forces have established a stable combat line, and Russia now faces a bloody task to break that line. Ukraine's Myrnohrad defense still holds. Meza reported as much on November 26th. This doesn't mean that the Russian threat has disappeared. Ukraine's forces are now stationed in the north, and the battle for the city continues to rage. Only now, Ukraine can conduct a controlled withdrawal from a city that is likely to fall, all while causing yet more attrition of Russia's soldiers and equipment. As for Putin, he'll be hoping that the soldiers he has sent to storm Myrnohrad will follow their orders. After all, troops ignoring what Putin tells them is becoming increasingly common in the Russian military, which has led to entire offensives falling apart. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the situations in Myrnohrad and Pokrovsk. And thank you as always for watching.